Hi everyone, Mark here. It is Wednesday evening here in DC, and we've just had confirmation that the United States has signed an economic partnership with Ukraine. This has come after weeks of negotiation over a deal that would give Washington access to Ukraine's minerals in exchange for ensuring its security. So it is a big deal for sure. A press release from the US Treasury released this evening says the two countries have agreed to form a reconstruction investment fund that will repay America's, quote, significant financial and material support, unquote, to Ukraine during the war with preferential access to Ukraine's natural resources. This is, of course, the deal that Zelensky came to Washington to sign weeks ago. The stage was set literally back then for the signing, but we all remember how it ended, that shouting match in the Oval Office, and Zelensky asked to leave. It's just breaking, this story, so we don't know the full detail of it, the fine print, the extent to which it is genuinely a security guarantee for Ukraine or a ripoff for Ukraine. We will give you a full breakdown in tomorrow's episode when we have a little bit more of a sense of precisely what it means. But it's certainly one step closer, perhaps, to a peace process, a peace plan for Ukraine. Now, let's get on with the rest of the episode.
Mark, I've not seen you since the White House Correspondents' dinner, and you'll remember I set you a task of getting a picture with an A-list celebrity.
Fail. Well, partly because there actually weren't many A-list celebrities there this year. Trump didn't turn up, and it all turned into a slightly lesser affair than it usually is. There was one amusing moment quite late in the night at one of the after parties. Me and a friend, a colleague and friend, were chatting to this guy. We must have been speaking for about 3 or 4 minutes, small talk, but it was interesting, and the drinks were flowing, and then I realised I hadn't introduced myself to him, so I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, what you do." He said, "I'm the governor of Delaware." I was like, "Oh right."
No big deal.
No big deal then.
I'm Martha Kelner.
And I'm Mark Stone. It's Thursday, the 1st of May, or day 102 of Donald Trump's presidency, the day the US economy shrank to its worst performance in 3 years. But whose fault is it?
That's the question. I've been at the White House for President Trump's cabinet meeting. Elon Musk flew in to join them.
Yes, Martha, it wasn't 24 hours ago that the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, claimed that the American economy was going great guns. But we've had dramatic proof that it doesn't seem to be going great guns, even ahead of the so-called Liberation Day. In fact, the US economy shrank by 3% in the first 3 months of this year.
Those headline figures make pretty bleak reading for the White House, and they're much worse than economists had expected. The economy shrinking in the first quarter for the first time since 2022. Experts are saying it's down to a couple of things. The first is a surge in imports as retailers quickly stockpiled goods from abroad ahead of these tariffs coming in.
Now, though, that the tariffs have begun, we're kind of seeing the opposite happening. I remember you talking about this a week or so ago in relation to ports on the West Coast. I kind of hadn't thought about it at the time, but it takes obviously a while for goods to get from the Far East here to the United States. And so there is a lag in the impact that these tariffs are having. But imports dropping off, that is going to have a knock-on impact on jobs here in warehouses, lorry drivers, all the rest of it. The chain effect of a drop-off in imports.
Yeah, if the economy is anxious now, then there is worse to come. In the coming days and weeks. I've been keeping up with warehouses, importers, truck drivers on the west coast of America. Like you just said, it takes 30 days for those shipments to come from China to the west coast of America. The tariff war with China began around April the 10th. So the impact of the tariffs will really start to bite around May the 10th. And we're obviously coming up to that date now, and the chief executive of the Port of LA says they're expecting a 35% decrease in shipments next week. And so that means that the casual workers who pick up, 1 or 2 days a week inside these warehouses, they're suddenly not going to have that work at all. And it means that people are being very conservative with their spending at the moment. That's obviously not just in this industry. That is across the board, across this country. Things like holidays and expensive big purchases, those are not happening anymore. And that's going to start to affect the economy.
I was just thinking, of my day yesterday at a Trump rally, the first one since his inauguration. It was a really fascinating opportunity to talk to the folk there who support him, who believe what he is doing is right and will literally make America great, prosperous and wealthy again. And, all of what you've been saying, or all of what we have seen, all of what the experts tell us, it appears to be playing out. Like, you can blame some of this on Biden because, and we'll talk in a minute about it being the beginning of January before Trump was president. But the problem is that the people I spoke to are not hearing what we are hearing. They're not hearing what we are talking about because America is so siloed. The echo chambers are so large and deep. I said to one woman, I said, you do realize that your goods in CVS, equivalent of Boots in the UK, they're going to go up. Oh, no, they're not, she said. It'll be fine. And I said, they may go up a little bit, she said. And I said, and you'll be prepared to pay more? Yes, because it will last no time at all. The prices will come down. Everything will even out. I mean, let's hope so.
That's what he's saying. Short, sharp pain for long-term gain. But
how short? How sharp?
Exactly.
Now, clearly, Martha, at the White House today where you were, this marathon cabinet meeting, all on camera, the economy was one key issue that they discussed.
Yeah, President Trump said right close to the top, you may have seen some figures, which was a slight understatement because the whole world has seen these figures. But almost in the next breath, he was blaming President Biden for the economy.
Core GDP, and this is, you probably saw some numbers today. And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this is quarterly numbers, and we came in and I was very against everything that Biden was doing in terms of the economy, destroying our country in so many ways. Not only at the border was more obvious, but we took over his mess in so many different ways.
He dealt with it head on and then deflected straight away.
Yeah, which is classic from the playbook. But of course, when does this economy become Donald Trump's economy? Because when the stock markets were rising in the first couple of days of his presidency, it was Donald Trump's stock market. So it's kind of convenient. When it's going well, it's his. When it's going not so well, it's still Biden's.
I did find it amusing listening to the news. I call it a news conference. It kind of was the cabinet meeting. At one point, he said, if the figures are bad in the second quarter, that too will be Biden's fault, which was actually made me chuckle.
But if they're good in the third quarter, they'll be back to being his, I'm sure.
It is the case that this first quarter clearly includes the beginning of January when Trump wasn't president. So perhaps he can deflect some of the blame there. But it's also the case that under President Biden, although people didn't feel it in their back pockets, the economy was genuinely the envy of the world. It was doing really well. Bidenomics, as it was known. He managed to turn the country around pretty quickly after that awful time during COVID. I think the problem was Biden, he had a lot of other problems as well, not least his age, but he didn't have the time to be able to allow his economic regrowth, allow people to feel that.
That was a huge problem, wasn't it? He couldn't convey that message of the strength of the economy to people who were still struggling to afford petrol and groceries and that sort of thing. That message never landed.
But more broadly, what an extraordinary spectacle. Again, I mean, you weren't in the cabinet room itself.
I wasn't, but I'm always struck by how these meetings with all of his cabinet members, they're kind of an exercise on who can love on Donald Trump the most, who can pay him the highest compliment. And Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, he was out of the traps very quickly. He was looking kind of forlorn. He's obviously beleaguered at the moment.
Sitting right next to him. And in fact, Donald Trump turned to him and said, I'm going to start with my least controversial cabinet member first. That's funny.
Raucous laughter in the room.
Secretaries and people around the table are making statements about how they're doing and what's happening. And I could start with Pete on the left because he's my least controversial person at the moment. No, they don't know how good he is.
But Pete Hegseth, really could not be more grateful to Donald Trump, clearly, for letting him keep his job. He said that Trump had sparked a recruiting renaissance for the military, that his actions in the first 100 days had been truly historic. Now, if you actually drill down on what's happened with military recruitment figures, they've been on the rise for the last few years, actually, and experts cite things like improving recruitment strategies, increased bonuses for the rise in recruitment figures. Potentially, Donald Trump's election could have played a part, but it's always key after these meetings to really drill down on what they're saying, because often the reality doesn't bear that much resemblance to what's been spoken in the room.
It is a wonderful opportunity to people watch that spectacle, because you look at the other figures around in the room. Elon Musk was there, although he doesn't work at the White House anymore, according to Susie Wiles, the chief of staff.
He actually flew in specially for this meeting because, like you say, he doesn't have a physical presence in the White House anymore. His work is done remotely. And he was wearing, when he arrived, a Doge baseball cap, that obviously being the department he's still head of. By the time he got in the room, he'd picked up one of a number of Gulf of America baseball caps that were dotted around this big grand table. And he was adjusting it so that he could put it on top of his Doge cap. Let me tell you, 2 caps is not a good look.
No.
Because by the time they spun round to Elon Musk, about an hour after everyone else had spoken, he looked very silly indeed, wearing his Gulf of America cap on top of his Doge cap. But
Dunce cap.
yeah, exactly. But Trump did say to him, Elon, thank you very much for being here. You've sacrificed a lot to be part of this administration.
He sacrificed his company almost.
Almost. Over 100 billion wiped from his net worth. Yeah, he has sacrificed a lot to be in the Donald Trump administration.
But a penny for their thoughts as the camera went round the room and you saw the individuals. Secretary of State Marco Rubio at one point appeared to, I mean, the sketch writers might assume he was doodling or something, because Trump was talking, an hour into this.
Yeah.
To his left, to his right, actually, there's Marco Rubio writing something down, but Trump's not talking about anything that's related to Marco Rubio's brief. So what's he writing down?
Drawing teddy bears or something.
I'm sure he wasn't, but it was fascinating to see, and you kind of wonder whether half of them are there wondering how they got there. But then they speak and they're fawning, at the other end of the scale, the base at the rallies. I asked them yesterday, that's why I said to them, he feels more like a king than a president. He is, they said.
And he's surrounded by his court in those cabinet meetings, and they are unwavering in their loyalty to him.
Talking of courts, have you noticed that there is even more gold in the Oval Office, not just in the Oval Office, but outside the Oval Office as well? Every president, when they come in, they put their own touches on it, but Trump's gone full throttle. So much gold inside. And now in the walkway that leads from the main bit of the White House past the Rose Garden to the Oval Office. On the outside, there is now some gold crusting outside as well. So it's...
He's making his mark, isn't he? New decoration as well outside the White House on the lawn where the journalists stand. White House staffers have placed placards on the lawn where the journalists stand outside Pebble Beach. And they have the faces of people that Donald Trump has deported in his first 100 days. They say things like arrested in big, bold letters, deported in big, bold letters. And some of these people are some of the individuals who are currently in that maximum security prison in El Salvador.
Yeah. And they're very cleverly placed right behind all the live shots of all the network news cameras on what's known as Pebble Beach. So they're very much in shot. They're also individuals who have gone through no judicial process to be deported.
I didn't see a picture of Kelner Abrego Garcia down there, interestingly enough. He, of course, is the most controversial, the most high-profile one of these men who was flown to the Seacot prison in El Salvador.
Yes, and his story formed a very spiky part of an interview that took place last night between Donald Trump and Terry Moran, who is a political correspondent for ABC News. This was an interesting interview, 40 minutes long, in the Oval Office. The first time that Trump has sat down in that forum with the mainstream media.
Yeah.
The sort of the non-Fox bit in mainstream media, should we say. But for me, the really interesting part was when they started talking about Kelner Abrego Garcia, because I don't know how much you've been following it, but he's got tattoos. We talked a lot about tattoos, right? relevant because they are being used as justification to deport people. If you've got tattoos which say certain things, you are therefore a member of a gang.
Yeah, a lot of the family members think that they are being deported purely for their tattoos because some of them have symbolism which is designated as indicating that they are part of MS-13 or Tren de Aragua.
Right, so the relevance with Garcia is that on his knuckle, he has 4 symbols. He's got a marijuana leaf, he's got a smiley face, he's got a cross, and he's got a skull. Right. Now, Trump released an image of a photograph of Garcia's fist, where you could see those 4 icons, the marijuana, the smiley face, the cross, the skull. But on top of them, in the photograph, they have put an M for marijuana, an S for the smiley face, a 1 above the cross, and a 3 above the skull. But it's photoshopped. The idea is that they are saying that those 4 symbols, it's code, effectively, for MS-13, the gang. And
that seems like a leap.
What's that?
That seems like a leap.
Yeah, a leap. And in fact, law enforcement officials say they know of no link existing between those symbols and MS-13. Nevertheless, Trump felt the need a few weeks ago to hold up this image. People then thought that maybe actually MS-13, that wasn't photoshopped. It was really on his hand. And then yesterday he was asked about that, and he said, well, you saw on his fist he had MS-13, and Terry Moran said, no, he didn't. That was photoshopped. Trump said, no, it wasn't photoshopped. It was real.
Wow.
And they had a to and fro over it. The point I took from it, Trump seems to genuinely believe that is on his fist, even though if you go to all the imagery that's out there of him, it's not on his fist. You know, sometimes you get the sense that the Trump administration knows something's not true, but if you say it enough times, then people will believe it. I think in this case, it almost feels like Trump thinks it is true because no one has actually had the courage to say to him, actually, that image you held up the other day, we had put that on there to illustrate a link that may or may not exist.
Yeah.
Broadly, though, a wider point, we were discussing this in the office earlier. He's cogent, right? He's on top of his brief. You mentioned it on another issue as well about it in the cabinet meeting. Compared to Biden, he's articulate in a very Trumpian way.
Yeah, there is no comparison there. You know, he has a complete hold over everyone on the room. They react instantly to every joke he makes, every swipe that he takes. And his transport secretary, Sean Duffy, was actually getting ahead of the FAA investigation into that DC plane crash, saying it was a problem with the air traffic control systems and that they were going to get that in hand. And just off the cuff, Donald Trump mentioned the altitude that the helicopter was travelling at, the altitude that the plane was travelling at when they crashed. And I thought, actually, that is quite impressive that he can just off the cuff recall that. It's certainly not something the previous president would have been able to do.
Well, that is it for today. Do get in touch with your questions. You know the email address by now, trump100@sky.uk. But we've got a long night ahead of us, haven't we?
We have. We've got the bosses in town for a Trump 100 celebration meal.
Yeah, but we've got a few tips, haven't we, from Donald Trump about how to fawn to your bosses.
I just had an expert lesson in how to suck up to the people in charge, so I'm going to be putting some of that into action tonight. I hope you're ready, Mark.
Oh, yeah.
Competition.
Absolutely. Anyway, that is it. We'll see you tomorrow for another day of Trump 100.
See you then.